for the next 30 minutes, I'm going to I'm going to explain where our research around the Lean Transformation Framework's taken us and share some of the learning that we've had from using it. And in particular, the contention here is that we may need to change the lens that we use to look at Lean implementation and explain why designing Lean learning experiences I think are so important if we want a better chance of change. In January 2014, John Shook introduced this framework, a way to think about Lean transformation, and it's the way that we've been looking at this with a series of different cases, partner companies, large and small, across a range of industries. And the framework introduces a way to think about transformation in a similar way, really, to the way that Dan and Jim taught us all to think about Lean, some principles and some questions to think about. So we've learned a lot about Lean and about doing Lean. One of the things, echoing what the guys just said, is that we've learned over the years that each company's circumstances are unique, and therefore you need a situational approach to doing a transformation. However, what we've also got to remember is that it's built around a Lean approach, and a unique and distinct feature of that is that we need to understand value from the perspective of the customer. So we've called that value-driven purpose, and here what we're doing is we're asking the question, what's the purpose of the organisation, and more specifically, what problem are you trying to solve? Next, we turn our attention to the first of the two pillars, and we've got this first pillar called process improvement, and that's the second real distinct piece of Lean, because what we're doing here is we're actually focusing on the work that creates value for the customer. And we're asking the question here, how do we do and improve the work that's of value? We've called the second of the two pillars capability development, and what we're doing here is we're asking how we develop the capability. In the centre of the house, we're focusing on leadership and the management system, and we're asking what kind of management system and leadership behaviours do we need. And for the foundations of the house, we refer to the basic thinking, the mindset and the assumptions. And we've used the transformation framework at halfway. So Sharon spoke yesterday about the site in Botswana, but there are 20 odd sites in that business. And this example is something that Terry put together in 2013. He always says, why do you use the 2013 example? Because it's moved on. And the reason for that is because this was before John talked about it. So we were shaping this before John started to talk about it and publish it. And at halfway, what we're doing is we're using it to articulate a thinking way, trying to align purpose, process and people. And Ngami is one of several sites that we've experimented with. And the beauty of having several sites is that what you're able to do is some set-based experiments. Keeping some of the variables in the change the same and altering some of the others, and then reflecting on what works and what doesn't work so that you can plan the next things to do. So little small scale experiments really. PDCA around the transformation itself. And what that allows us to do is to isolate those variables. And of course, when we're dealing with transformation, it's not quite the same as an experiment in a lab. But what this approach allows us to do is it allows us to refine our questions and our thought processes as we move forward. So what's the collective experience? Well, we know that Lean will work anywhere, but not everybody's successful. In fact, most probably aren't. And therefore, probably, the most glaring gap that we've got is to understand why initiatives fail, why implementation isn't as fast as it could be, and that finding out can only really be learned by doing. And my question I've got, I don't know whether this is right or not, but we talk a lot about products, about being able to deliver them right first time on time. But we never talk about being able to do a change right first time on time. We talk about that as being a craft. So I always have this question in the back of my head. Can we do this with a shorter lead time? Can we do it better? Can we do it cheaper? Can we do it Can we do it faster? So, so our experience so far, you know, and something that has struck me as we've gone through this process is that in less successful examples, lean has been probably implemented using quite formulaic approaches, often coming from outside the organisation. Many firms have lean programs. In the early days, they were characterised by the Kaizen promotion office doing event-based improvement, Kaizen events. And people did at least learn some tools and techniques, but often the impact didn't last that long. And perhaps the tools took on too much importance in many of the firms. Later on, we got tools put together into developments of systems, and others had boot camps in which people had to be trained in lean and get a badge and so on. And more recently, we've ended up with a whole load of training courses and certification, which is just basically a clever way for consultants to sell you more days, really. And you know, there's a whole load of stuff like benchmarking activities, which might be at a company level, or they might also be at an internal level. And it's often, not always, done in such a way that the end result's the certificate relating to the project or the individual who needs, actually never do this ever again. I've got this badge now, and then that's kind of it. So, and for the site, well, it's been leaned. So such approaches, I think, really miss the point about what lean is all about. Solving problems to provide better value for customers by everyone in an organisation. In other words, what it's really about is it's about learning, and that's the theme of the summit. So my takeaway is that real transformations aren't characterised by implementing a series of steps or solutions, but addressing key questions on purpose, process, and people. I don't think Toyota started with their house. It developed into that TPS house. So why would firms think that they could copy their view of this in order to implement? Instead, a more reliable method to introduce lean is to think about the questions we need to ask, and therefore the gaps we need to close, rather than thinking about the solutions we think we should apply. These two houses look very similar, but really the intent is very, very different. And the hope is that perhaps by asking our own questions for our own situations, we can improve the level of right first time change. If you put it another way, cherry picking tools isn't enough. The tools are important, but they really comprise a system. For the tools to be useful, we need to understand how they focus us on the flow of value, and a way of thinking really underlies those tools and the system. And then actually you can only learn that by doing. So the concept of having a boot camp is a bit stupid, really. So, you know, given all of that, if you really can only learn this by doing, maybe it's time to really start to think about the learning experience that you use in actually doing the doing. So by being explicit about what we're trying to teach, maybe we can design an experience for participants so they can understand the fundamental thinking. And over time, they should be able to design their own learning experiences for the colleagues and develop experiences in different environments. Maybe that'll deepen and enhance the understanding of the principles and the skills. And you know, Sharon showed you a number of such experiments that she's designed. But by creating a learning experience for Sharon centered around flow, she was then able to take that to lots of different areas because she understood the fundamental principle. And I think that's really, really important to think about. The other thing that struck me is that how necessary it is to be explicit about the fundamental thinking. So quite often I'll talk to people and they say they're doing lean, and you kind of say, well, why are you doing this, and what's underpinning it? I've got 3 examples of fundamental thinking that I'll share before giving you a couple of examples of things that we've been doing. And the first one is understanding how your company makes a profit. Do you add a margin on top of your cost, or to determine the profit, or do you set a target price and then reduce the costs to ensure the profit? Loads of industries. Anybody ever had any work done in the home knows that the way the plumber works is the left-hand side. You know, the bill is always more than you actually expected. But his margin, he protects. Of course, mathematically these are the same, but philosophically they're radically different and result in a different operational approach. The second fundamental is how you treat efficiency. There's a difference between apparent efficiency and true efficiency. Is it efficient to get a 20% increase in producing 120 units when the customer really only requires 100? Maybe true efficiency is to produce the required 100 units with 8 people when the current method requires 10 people, not to try to produce 120, 20 more than the customer needs. And then this, on the right-hand side diagram, one boat's rowing in a straight line, the other one is weaving around. The reason? Because each rower is not working at the same pace. And it's easy to understand that that's not optimal, but at work we often look simplistically at the local performance rather than thinking about the whole. The third fundamental is overproduction. It's the worst waste. It conceals problems relating to quality, to customer delivery, to costs, and it impacts on what team leaders do. Action isn't just bad, it's actually evil. And it has so many unintended consequences. So of course we could talk all day about the counterintuitive nature of lean, but that's not the point here. The point is that we need to understand the fundamentals and be explicit about them so that we can design learning experiences that surface them in such a way that people internalize change. And here are a couple of examples. First one's a thing called value-driven purpose. And when I've been working with Halfway, we've made good progress, but one area that we've really had a gap in is this whole understanding of customer value and the importance of customer fulfillment, being able to deliver a car serviced right first time on time. And the sites, it was in the strategy, it was in Terry's house, but the sites just weren't able to operationalise it. It was too hard for them to measure. But what we did was a very, very small scale experiment, and we've called it the Veronica chart. It's the Veronica chart because Veronica's filling it in. And Veronica's a lady working for Sharon. So there's nothing fancy about this. Don't go off and say, we'll need a Veronica chart. It's just basically, it's basically right first time on time. And using the flow bay, what we did was we asked Veronica to measure for every car the right first time on time for each step in the process. And for each step, the vehicle would either be on time, early or late. And if not on time, we'd ask for the reason why, and we'd ask her to document it. And then the point's not the score, but an understanding of customer value. Right first time on time. That gives us a clear link between the value, the purpose, and the problems faced by the team. In addition, it's end-to-end, not a point optimization. So the problems are being captured in real time, and go and see them becomes a requirement for the frontline supervisor and a starting point for the Kaizen. Because now I understand, oh, wait a minute, so, we got that? Oh yeah, we have. We get the reasons why we fail to fulfill on each one of these individual cars. I started that one at 7:30, I will finish it by 8:30. If I finished it, it's all okay, with good quality, but if I didn't finish it, what were the reasons why? So that becomes the starting point for the Kaizen. Second learning, so right first time, clear link between the value, the purpose and the problems, end-to-end focus, respect for the individual because the problems start getting identified, ensures that you go and see small improvements to close the gaps. Second experience, understanding and improving the work. So current condition, this is actually in Ottery, it's in Cape Town. Current condition, one entrance, one exit to the workshop. That's what it is. You know, so basically there were several problems here. Long customer queue, customers are all coming in the morning, dropping their cars off for service. Service advisors were going out to the queue to get ahead. Customers didn't want to wait, so service advisors were going outside to try to process the customers. Customers are still waiting because they were waiting for the driveway to get unblocked. 7 minutes to see a customer, so what's the problem? And I asked this on Monday. We did a workshop and I got lots of answers. And I didn't kind of say, well, really is the answer? But the answer's flow. It's one-piece flow. How are we going to introduce one-piece flow? So let's take a look. Whoa, just a minute. Can you run me the video, please? Whoa. Okay. So customers driving into a receival area. You can see you can't go anywhere else. That's where you can go. So of course we could build a new building, but that would cost us a load of money. And we haven't got time to do that. We need to harness the ideas of the people doing the work. Lizelle's the service advisor. She's checking with the customer. She's finding out, just checking to confirm what work is going to be carried out. You can see a driver in the background putting seat protection on, etc., etc. And then what she's going to do is she's going to walk around that car to make sure that there's no damage on it, or if there is damage that we note it, so the customer knows that that we know that what the condition of the car was. Sorry about the bins. I was trying not to point the video in the customer's face. But she walks around the car. She checks this damage, noting different items. All the way to the front. Then she goes and has a bit more of a chat to the customer. In this case, one thing that we noticed here the first time was that she wasn't able this time to lead the customer around the car, to check the car with the customer. So she then had to go back to then drag him back round the vehicle. And of course, at this time now, this car's waiting, isn't it? It's a bit like Lewis Hamilton. He's had his tyres changed, but somebody else has still got to do something else, and so he's stuck in the pits. So now she escorts him to reception, and we think now this car can go. Come on, this needs to go. We need to go. We need to get the next one in. But there's all kinds of other things. She's writing some paperwork up on the left-hand side. She's got to go and get the VIN number off the license disc, and so on and so forth. And it feels like a long time, doesn't it, when you're watching this? So can you imagine what it'd be like as a customer? It feels like a long time. This particular bit feels like a really long time. Yeah, so now she's writing up the details. She's got a little bench just to the right-hand side, left-hand side, sorry. It's a long time, isn't it? Car's just stopped. No value. 2 minutes 46. It's only 2 minutes 46. That's not bad, is it? Can you imagine in the UK going into a car dealer and actually being seen in 2 minutes 46? It takes you 2 minutes 46 to actually find somewhere to park in most of the places. Then we've got the rain. So this is about 12 months later. This is May 2016, and they've done a whole load of different things. One of the things that they've done is they've moved. Jesus. There we go. They've moved the protection for the seat. It was on this side. It's now on this side, because they realised that the drivers had to keep going backwards and forwards. I mean, very, very simple things, really. They've eliminated the need for the table, because what they really want to do is get this customer out of the way into the reception, so that this car can begin to flow. Then the customer feels more comfortable. They're in a better environment and so on. But still doing the basic check around the car and so on. So this is about it's about 1 minute 45. So instead of 2 minutes 45, it's 1 minute 45. And of course, this is one car at a time, and the queue is much less, and the delay is much less.
Morning. No free hands.
So, next one. So now we've changed even more. We've got paperwork on the right-hand side. See anything else changed? Well, we've got some mirrors up in the corners. And they actually originally were for technicians to use. But we altered the process again in October. Well, the guys altered the process again in October. So you'll see in a second the next change. Okay. The question to ask really is, what's the purpose of the process? To decide whether or not there's any improvement potential. So actually, the purpose of this process is really to be able to understand all the work necessary that could be found once the car is physically on the premises, so that we stand the chance of making an unpredictable car predictable. Once you understand that, then you can put a lot of the activity right at the front. So now what they're doing is they're checking the lights, they're checking the wipers, etc. 5 things are 80% of all the additional work that you ever have on your car. So if we can find that earlier, we eliminate the need for authority and all those kind of things. Okay? So, obvious that what we needed to teach here was one-piece flow. But there are actually a number of lessons. The first lesson is to focus on the work. The experience needs to embed the importance of observation to understand the problem, not jump into conclusions. We want to differentiate value from waste. Teams now aware of the non-value creating activity. We also want to meet the customer demand and to limit overproduction. No more going to the queue so that you look busy, instead of letting the work come to the station where all the materials and the equipment are available. One-piece flow is key, made possible by improving layout, creating stability and standardizing the work. But don't forget capability. Knowledge of the work is actually key in designing work. I think that's actually maybe one of the biggest limitations to the idea of staffs doing improvement. Don't really deeply understand the work that needs to be looked at. And when we're doing this whole idea of capability, we need to develop capability to do the skill, but to promote and do the Kaizen, to develop people, to build a team work, and actually to think about a way to behave. So I've done a lot of reflection this year. The subsequent process of that process is this process here. And it's a 2-stage bay. There's some more work done while the car's on the deck, and then there's some guys here that this car then moves to here, gets put up in the air, the oil gets drained, the wheels get looked at, they come off and they check the brakes and so on. And in station 1, work on the floor is carried out, 10-minute cycle time, 10-minute tact. Vehicle then moves to station 2, where the vehicle's raised, the remaining work's carried out. One-piece flow gives you these kind of benefits. In a traditional workshop, the average time, the average amount of cars per day is 4 to 5. And if a guy was getting 5 cars a day off a ramp or a hoist, they'd think that was quite good in 1 8-hour day. For years, we've been doing 2 guys working on the car. And we've done that in a 30-minute cycle. That's what a lot of the manufacturers are just waking up to. And Toyota's been doing it for a while, but they're just waking up to doing this. And that gives you 30 minutes and 16 cars a day. Flow gives you, with a 10-minute cycle time and a 10-minute tact, 48 cars per day out of 1 hoist. That's a game changer. Changes the economics of the industry, changes the amount of space you need to build dealerships, the capital investment, and so on. But what I really learned, and Dan asked me to do this, it's 18 years ago, Dan. 1998, I think it was. And 18 years after we did the first bay with 2 technicians on the car. What I really learned was I learned the power of deep observation. Even though I thought I knew a lot about this stuff, and even after I'd been doing something for years, I actually realized that each situation is different. But what I also learned was that I'm not working in these dealers. So for me to have the idea is pretty worthless, really. And actually, for me to implement the idea is really worthless. Unless the people that are doing the work and the ones that I'm working with understand the principle I'm trying to teach. If we can do that, then we're creating a learning experience to teach the principles rather than just implement our ideas. Good lean learning experiences equals good process. If the process is good, then the results can be good. So there are some implications here. Lean teams have got a great opportunity. Instead of managing a program and thinking about your boot camp and thinking about how you can roll lean out, you should really start to think about how you can create learning experiences for people so they can do lean themselves. And managers have got a great opportunity because they can find themselves a teacher. Could be somebody internally, it could be somebody in that internal team, or it could be somebody external that they can bounce ideas off and gain confidence to try something different. And that's my reflections for 2016. So any questions? There are some questions on the slide. Sorry, I couldn't follow it while I was talking. Sorry? Yeah, I think, you know, the guys from GKN had a very nice visual, didn't they, about little problems and then them becoming bigger problems and then very, very big problems. So I think actually some of the problem identification relates to purpose and to what you're trying to actually do. So that's one side of it. But the other thing is, don't stifle people at the front line making improvements. Encourage them to make improvements and encourage them to fail. So that's the other side to it. How did you achieve it to service a car in 10 minutes if you need to repair suspension? Okay, so suspension becomes unpredictable. But as I said, 5 things are 80% of the demand. So of the additional work. So we've incorporated the 5 things into the flow. And if it needs something else, then actually it'll have to go out and the customer would have to be informed. Yes, you have a separate flow. And actually a separate flow at booking too, because you can go all the way back to booking. So we realise that learning is key and should be faster than ever. What are your thoughts to inject the lean thinking in our educational system? Yeah, we've had some people talking about that last year. Christleton High School talked about that, and I think, you know, there are some experiments, Saskatchewan and so on. I think it's important, really important. What alert signs are there if the lean transformation goes wrong? Yes, yeah. So you know, one of the things we've been doing a lot of is we've been using the questions in the lean transformation framework to assess how good we are at transforming. And I think that's quite a nice way to do that, because it highlights weaknesses in each of our approaches, really. So, okay.